Hey everyone, welcome back to Drive On. I'm your host, Scott DeLuzio, and today my guest is Caleb Walker. Caleb has been hard at work building a tool that can help veterans improve their network, which is crucial to many veterans who recently transitioned out of the military, even those who've been out for a little while. Having a strong network, professional network, and other networking is super important. And so we're going to talk about the specifics of how this all works and how it can be used to assist the military, the veteran communities. So before we get into that, Caleb, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Hey, thanks, Scott.
Yeah, so we met a few weeks ago at the military influencer conference. Awesome event. Met a lot of people there. Um, great, great for networking, and that's the reason why I bring that up because so many people there. There's thousands of people, and you meet so many people, and unfortunately, sometimes you start to forget some of the names and faces. You might have a business card or something from somebody, but it gets a little tricky. So I'm sure what we're going to talk about today might be able to help in situations just like that. So um, I guess before we get into kind of the networking aspect of things, can you share a little bit about your background, the military background, and kind of what got you into in entrepreneurship and getting into the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, thanks. I did 20 years in the Army, 3 tours to Afghanistan. One was a troop commander, one was like as a JTAC FU, and then one was a task force commander of the close protection for the ambassador. It was about 20 people. We used to take care of that in Kabul in 2016-17. I did like a variety of different jobs. And then my last job was a part-time gig. It was the chief initiatives group for the Army commander. I did a little bit of this and a little bit of that all over it. And then the reason why I got out, I mean, there's like, I would say there's probably like four, 2 or 3 or 4 things. But actually, as most people that have been in the Army know, the units are actually a whole lot of fun. Like they're actually pretty innovative, particularly when you're overseas. Like you can try stuff out, you can innovate, you can throw around ideas, and it's a real good test bed a lot of times. And I really enjoyed that. But then when I went to like the headquarters, which is in Ottawa, it's just there's no it's the bureaucracy kills all innovation. And so I worked on a bunch of projects. One of them I worked on was like the managed readiness system review, where I reviewed like how's the Army structure, training, personnel, all these things back in 2019. And I worked on it for like 10 months with a team of like 20 people. And then when I like basically presented it to 14 different generals, they all kind of agreed individually, yeah, that's what needs to happen. We need to change that. But then in the meeting with everybody, it's like nothing changed. And so I was like, okay, I get the point. It's like, is it me or is it the organization? I don't think I'm the right person for this organization. I didn't have a pension or anything, but I had 20 years, and I was like, I think I'm going to go try something different because I like to change stuff up and poke at things and I think I'm probably I'm kind of annoying, I guess, if I was like in a large bureaucracy that has structure, process. You're supposed to do this. You're supposed to do this. After a while, I think people would just get sick of me because I'd always be like, hey, we should try this. We should try this. We should do this. We should do that. Which is great for the entrepreneurial world.
Sure.
But in a bureaucratic structure, they probably all want to kill me. So I guess I was lucky that I could quickly just come to terms with the fact that like this is probably not the right spot for me. And if
Sure.
I was to be truly honest, it probably never was. The Army was never the right spot for me. But because the Afghanistan war was going on, it just allowed opportunities for training, workup training, deployments that really were like exciting, different, like in the units. But then I had only ever been posted to headquarters for like 9-month stints a couple times before I got to like my final part of my career. And every time I got posted to the headquarters, it was like the worst job in the world. Like I'd be like trying out doing my LSTATs. So I'm like, maybe I should do an MBA. Like maybe I should retire and do something. So it was always like within 2 months of being in the bureaucracy at the headquarters, I was like immediately having like an identity crisis. And then like a few months later, they're posting back to a unit. And I'm like, oh, it's actually pretty fun here. I have no real concern. So so it's a long story, but For all those people that say that the military is not very innovative, there is parts of the military that are very innovative. I find, particularly in some of the units, they can be. But in the headquarters, I mean, it's just the way that it functions. It's not so
Sure.
much.
Well, and yeah, like you said, when you're deployed, you have a little more leeway with the types of innovation that you do. Like if it's stupid but it works, it's not stupid, and you can get away with it, right? And if like you come up with a crazy idea, it it's cool, because ultimately you're there fighting a war and you want to win. So if you find something that works, that's not written in any handbook or manual or done by strict procedures or anything, but it works, like, well, then do it,
Yeah,
right?
it's one of the hilarious parts of the military that public servants like to make fun of the military. It's like, you guys are all about mission command and innovation and giving so much power to the front line. And in tours, you did. Like when I was a task force commander, I had only 20 people, but like essentially, like my reporting was to Ottawa. So like nobody else was telling me anything to do. We used to like hire airplanes to go to different parts of Afghanistan. Went to Bamiyan province, like rented like SUVs to drive the ambassador around all over the place. Like we pretty much did whatever we wanted. Like we would send like little reports back to Canada, say, hey, just so we're going to Kandahar Airfield in 2017 to go check it out, which is it's amazing. But that same mission, like warfighting, operational context of like kind of just get it done, is like the total opposite of what happens in the bureaucracy
Yep.
of any organization. I mean, sure, Pentagon, everyone that's ever been like a unit commander and like a really well-performing, great team, then gets posted into some cubicle somewhere and wants to like end their life. It's no different. It is what it
Sure.
is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, what you we talked about kind of in the intro, about networking and the conference that we were at and growing your own personal or professional network. I think that's an important thing when you're transitioning out of the military, having those people that you can reach out to who are in your network, even after transitioning out of the military. Your career is not just on autopilot. You're going to be probably making some moves or getting promotions and that types of thing. Maybe you're starting your own business, and having people in your network who you can reach out to and contact is super important. So I don't think I mentioned the name of your company and what you do, but it's Collabowave. And so tell us how it addresses some of the challenges of kind of collaboration, communication, that type of thing, in a networking type of environment.
Yeah. Well, I'll quickly speak to where it comes from first, and then
Sure.
show how like why we started it. I mean, when I was in Kabul and task force commander, like you had to have relationships. Like you had to have like I had to work with the NATO guys, the embassies, and like like the hospital because nobody had enough stuff for themselves. Like so, inevitably
Hmm.
you have to rely on another partner. So it was like the Norwegian Special Forces for like internal security, and then there was like the NATO QRF for like in the city, and then you needed if you wanted to fly around the place, you needed to talk to someone else. Um, but anyway, like military people aren't not that good at like keeping relationships. Like they're very mission focused. They're very orders focused. Like once they get the thing done, they kind of just move on to the next thing. And they might
Right.
know and remember some of those stakeholders in their back of their head, but there's no incentive for them to write that down or anything. Like you have that one person that's like the amazing handover where they have every single person they've ever talked to, and that's captured. But typically it doesn't happen. And it's they're just not like salespeople don't even do it. Like if you're looking outside the military, salespeople are incentivized. Like they can get fired if they don't fill out a system of record properly with like all the conversations they're having and all the things they're doing. So you can guarantee that a military or public servant aren't doing it. So what we did for Collabowave was like, okay, I want to improve that. I want to be able to like capture small piece of information. I don't expect people to go type it into a system somewhere because that's never going to happen. And so what we built was like a voice to text where you can just give small notes. It could be a 30-second note. It could be a 3-minute note. It could be even an hour-long meeting. But it summarizes what you said, and then it feeds into your system based on information that you typically care about. And I could show demos and stuff, but it's on the website. So I could be saying, yeah, I'm talking to Scott. He has a podcast, Drive On. He talks to veterans and he helps them with the transition, with great ideas and great points that he needs to consider. Whatever it is that like would be important information from our discussion here. I basically just speak into my phone, into the app, and then it just breaks that down into very important aspects of that conversation, and it feeds it right into your system of record. So like that's kind of what we're doing for the military. We're doing it the same thing. Like it's just the nature of the military and police forces and security. It's like 75% of the stuff that they of all their communication is verbal. They don't sit behind computers all day most of the time and like read a bunch of emails and read a bunch of material. It's all through radio, phone, out in the battlefield, or on like a briefing room. It's all verbal discussions, which creates a whole bunch of issues. First of all, basically, there's no analytics ever of what you're capturing. Because nobody wants to record everything, and so usually after action reviews or police reports or anything that like even like in a training situation to give feedback to students, you have to write it all afterwards, which is super cumbersome. Like police officers, it's like a third of their job is just to sit around writing police reports. And it's also, because it's all verbal too, it can be quite overwhelming. It's where a lot of miscommunication and errors happen. I mean, I used to know this as a Ford observer. I'd have like 3 different radio nets going at once. I'd have like the battery, I'd have like the combat team, and I'd have like the aircraft, and I'd miss stuff all the time. And luckily I didn't, hurt anyone by accident. But like, yeah, it can be super in a firefight. It can be pretty bad. So for all these reasons, like that's the initial problem we're trying to solve is like, how do we get small snippets of voice to text and make them actionable into like a database of some sort. But then so that's what I was like focused on. But then I started going to events, and I'd be walking around events and be like, people are talking all over time, but like nobody's ever writing this down, or they're capturing like 100 business cards that are going to the garbage after this thing. And I ask everybody like, how are you taking notes? And it's all just paper, back of the head. You forget most of it. You forget 80% of it like the next day. And so we just use the same tool that we're trying to do to make better warfighters or help out police officers to do the cool stuff and less of the paperwork stuff. It's the same thing for events and for veterans to connect as well. So that's kind of part of it is like, hey, how do you go to an event as a veteran? And every time you meet someone that's interesting, you can just take a quick note, get their email address, and then it just logs it away either in an Excel spreadsheet, if that's all you use, or into your client relationship management system. So that way you can follow up with the right people going forward. And so that's how we do it individually. But then for the whole community, what we're doing is with permission, we record like a whole meeting. So say like 10, 20 veterans get together and they talk about what they're interested in, what they're doing, what they want to do in the next month. And by recording it and taking those insights out of it, we can then give recommendations and say, just because you met with 20 other veterans over here, you're interested in starting your own business, like a fitness business. Well, in the other part of the country, there's this other group of 20 veterans, and there's a person in that group that actually wants to start a fitness business or hiking or whatever, military history, whatever the way. And so that's what we're kind of rolling this thing out for now. Because I think everyone I talk to, doesn't matter if it's a general or if it's a private, when they leave the military, they lose their network, and so they feel like they're isolated, and they feel uncomfortable like building out relationships. But there's enough relationships in the veteran community that should be able to vector you in the right direction. And so what I'm trying to do is like make it easy to put in who you meet and how they will help you, but then also to recommend people in different communities across the country to hey, have you met Scott? And that's basically how we're doing it. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah, and I like that because, like I was saying before, at a conference like the Military Influencer Conference, I know there's tons of other conferences, right? But you talk to so many people, and sometimes you're like, that guy or that lady, that's the person I really want to be talking to. And after the conference, I want to follow up with them. And when you get home, you get this stack of business cards that's like okay, which one was that person, right? And how do I remember all that from a stack of business cards? Or, it's not even consistent because sometimes there's people who they don't have business cards. And so when you get home, it's like, okay, who was that? Like maybe they just wanted to connect on LinkedIn and they show the little QR code on their phone or whatever, and you connect, which is fine. Like that works because you get connected. But then later on, remembering who was that person and how did we connect and all that. It's very cumbersome, especially after a multi-day conference where it's day after day talking to dozens of people, and at the end of the 3-4 days, however long the conference is, you're you're so overwhelmed with all this information. Even after one day, it's a lot of information to take in, um, and what do you do with all that? So yeah, it would be wonderful if like right after, let's say you and I are talking and it's like, oh, Caleb has this business. I think it's really cool. I might want to connect with him because maybe I have this idea for something that I want to do and we can collaborate and all that kind of thing. If I could just have a quick note that feeds that into either a spreadsheet or a CRM or some follow up to do list somehow, um, that would give me some actionable things. What is it that I need to do with this? Or maybe we talk to somebody and we're like, what, that person, I don't think we really have much going on together. But that's still important information because if they reach out, then I have to remember, okay, was I impressed by this person? Do I not want to talk to this person? That type of thing. And so having that information as well is super important. Um, but then you were also talking. I want to get a little more into this about connecting people from maybe different parts of the country, and potentially even different parts of the world, with each other if there's some commonality, some connections. I'd love to know like kind of how these groups come about and how you organize all that.
Yeah, so I'm working with one group in Canada. It's called Triple Victor. And so they're basically a community of just veterans that have left and they're getting into business. It's just a nonprofit or starting their own business or what have you. And so what you do is you work out what is everyone interested in,
Mm-hmm.
just do a quick survey, and then you put them into groups based on geography and interest. So it's how do you match them together closely. And then from there, just if based on interest, if they're willing, either you record their whole online get together if they're just chatting, or you use the note taker right after, and you just kind of fill it in right after. But then you're able to capture like some of the insights of like what are people working on, and so you kind of do like. Everyone kind of has a chance of like what they're working on, a success, a failure, a lesson, what's their goal is for next month. But then from all that, you can just kind of vector all those different interests and ideas and things. So you kind of get the strength from the group because
Mm-hmm.
they're all in the same location. They're kind of all interested in the same thing. And so you're just like really just talking as a mentorship team as a group of like 10 people. But then, the added insight is that you can start to vector other people. I'm looking at like getting my business sold into this kind of industry. Well, then
Mm-hmm.
you'd get like the 3 or 4 other people from across the country that are also in that industry, and they can give like they just recommend out advice that they could do through an automated email and say, hey, this person actually works in this industry,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's just through a vector database. I don't have to get too technical, but like it just makes that relationship, and then it just automates an email out and says, hey, you two should get together. You two should get together, and so that's kind of working because like a lot of people. I found a lot of veterans don't really want to be on LinkedIn because they're kind of worried about the security issues
Mm-hmm.
of that, or they just don't want to be out there that much just because of
Sure.
their personality or just like the mottos of the military.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is just be email based in the background. Like you don't have to really put yourself out there, and it just recommends people through email once a month. Like, hey, you should talk to this person. You should talk to this person. So that's kind of what we're building out right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and I like it too because it's kind of that icebreaker that you might need because I might go on LinkedIn, I might even be on LinkedIn, and I might go around and I'll be searching for somebody who is in a particular industry or geographic area or whatever it is that I'm looking for. I might find somebody, but I might feel awkward just cold reaching out to them, and even sometimes when people do cold reach out to you, you might just tend to ignore it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's kind of, oh, what is this guy going to sell me? What is it? It's some spammy nonsense, right? And so I don't want to have to deal with that, so I'm just going to ignore it, block it, whatever. Um, but if you get some sort of feedback, like why is this person a good person to connect with, right?
Hmm.
And then so this automated message comes through and say, hey, these x number of people would be good to connect with because of XYZ reasons. And then it's like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, let's connect and see, even if it's just a quick Zoom call or something, just to see where each other's at and what we can do together. I think that's a pretty cool feature as well with this, because um, when you when you don't know the people, it's just super awkward sometimes to make that initial contact. But once when that contact's made, you're golden. You're good to go, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm trying out a few things too. Like maybe it's a double buy-in. So you'd actually wouldn't just email the email directly. You'd email
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, there's someone that wants to talk to you about their business, about this industry. Would you be okay with that introduction? And then you send the other email to the other person and say, hey, there might be someone
Yeah,
that's actually in the industry that might be interested in you. And if like they both agree, yeah, yeah, and then they kind of go and they get connected together
sure.
from there. So you can kind of de-risk it a little bit. Like if people, but yeah, it's something I'm working on because I find that people go like we have these like veteran events that everyone's invited to, and or as you think of it, you go there, and it usually takes like the whole event to work out like that one person you probably should have been talking to, and it's like 5 minutes before the end of the event, you're like, oh man, I
Right.
uh, I should have been talking to you the whole time. Like this is ridiculous. Which is, that is part of nature. Like you are just gonna fumble around and like finally find that snippet. What I'm hoping to try and do is like front load it. So
Mm-hmm.
like if you record enough of these conversations and you get enough of this information about like the person's background, you should be able to go to the meeting if you've never met some of these people before and go, yeah, well, last 6 months ago this person was working on this and this person likes hiking and blah 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 blah, and it gives you a bit of a background on what their interest is and how you could what you could collaborate together, because it would just be
Mm-hmm.
reading your profile and comparing it to that person's profile, and it'd be
Yep.
making a vector of like what's useful and what not useful. They have 3 kids, you have 3. I don't know, whatever it is. But
Sure.
yeah, that's kind of so that way you should be arriving and you're looking for those 3 people that are
Mm-hmm.
actually going to really drive your conversation forward instead of just fumbling around. I mean,
Right.
at Mick, for example, you could fumble around there for 2 days until you finally meet that one person. And you're like, oh wow, wish I had talked to you a lot earlier.
And you might not even meet that person because there's so many, right? And I know I tried doing that on my own before even going to the conference, because I went through the list of attendees that they had on the app or website or whatever they had,
Hmm.
and I just went through, and I was it was really hard because I'm looking at, in the list, it's names, and I think their title was all that I was given, and so it's like, okay, well, that doesn't give me a ton of information, and maybe the company they worked for, or whatever they were representing, I think that's like the limit of the information that I had, uh, and not to fault them or anything, it was great, setup and everything, but there's close to 2,000 people who are there, and so
Yeah.
going through that list of all those people, that takes some time, and so likely I miss some people that I probably would have wanted to talk to, but there's just so many, and maybe they didn't have a really good description of what their title was or something, and so maybe I just skipped over them.
And
But if
the
they had a decent amount of information in there about who they are, what they did, all that kind of stuff, um, and I got a recommended list based on my interests and what I'm looking to get out of the conference, and all these people are looking for something similar. Give me a list of 5 people, 10 people, whatever it is, and I'll just go talk to those people and have a really highly focused event. And
well,
I think that would be way better, right?
yeah, and so first of all, most people didn't even use the app in Mick. That was the
Right.
feedback I got. So you could have reached out to them all you wanted, but they're not going to answer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what I would have done for Mick, as a perfect example, like it's a conference 2,000 people. What I would have done, because you can just automate this, right? Like you don't actually
Hmm.
have to be at every conversation. But
Right.
I would have sent out a survey to everybody. It's like, hey, if you come to Vic, just answer like these 5 questions. Like, what are you interested? What are you not interested in? Which is just as important of a question, and like a couple other questions as well of like to kind of understand like where they're coming from. And then I would have just automated out an email to all 2,000 people with like, here's like 2 timings. Pick one of these two, and then I would have set them all up into groups of like 10 before the conference,
Hmm.
and just allowed people to kind of say what are they trying to get out of that conference. So it's really just them talking to 10 other people. They might never ever talk to those people ever again. Hopefully they do, but it's just like, what are you trying to get out of that conference? What are you interested in? What are you not interested in? And what would look like for you? You record
Hmm.
all those conversations, transcribe, and then you would just, before everyone shows up the week before, you're like, okay, here's the 2,000 people's what they are interested in, what they're not interested in, what their goals are, what they're looking for, and then you would just give them like 10 recommendations, because it's not only is it like the 10 things, like the 10 people that are interested in the same thing you're in, but they might also be not interested in something. Like they might
Hmm.
just say like, don't pitch me this. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to see anything of that, and then that saves you time bugging them with an
Yep.
idea, and that awkwardness.
Hmm.
And so it really just vectors in like, these are the 10 people you should connect, and here's the reason for it. So that's kind of like at a larger scale. That's kind of what I'm hoping to do for events going forward. Yeah, and so I'm just working off the whole Collabowave solution, and it's building off of that.
Yeah, and going back too to what you're talking about as far as like the military and first responders and people like that who could use a tool like this, a lot of times you're right. People rely on just their own personal knowledge of, oh, I know this guy is good at X, whatever that thing is, and that's a really good person to call in when I need that type of support. And so that person knows that, and that's wonderful that that person knows it. But what happens when that person's not there and somebody else is working that shift, and they need that type of support? If they don't have that data available, in some centralized location, then it just makes their job a whole lot harder. Because now they have to, not only do they have a problem to solve, but now they have to go find the person to help with solving that problem. They may not be equipped to do it well themselves, so that just adds more complexity to it. And it doesn't make sense. You shouldn't have to rely on that. Like the best thing you could do is document all this stuff in one way or another. Um, Whether you have a notebook with names and phone numbers and information, or you have it digitally, which probably is better because it's easier to update.
And
A
hand
digital
over.
version of it, right? I
Yeah.
think that's a great tool to have, right?
That's literally, yeah, Scott. That's literally what I'm trying to solve. Because like the
Mm-hmm.
guy before me on my last task force tour, he didn't keep any. He didn't really care about the relationships, so it just wasn't his. Like he didn't have
Sure.
them. And so I was like, oh. But then even my handover, if I really think about it, it wasn't a great handover. There was
Mm-hmm.
things that I missed. And so what you want to have is just a central system where you can see kind of all the conversations you're having and who you should be talking to, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what I'm doing for the Canadian Navy, actually. One of the solutions we're building out is like, they have a new destroyers coming in, and they want to know, not only do they want to know who's the right person to talk to, because there's like 5 different teams and there's like 20 different stakeholders and who's saying what to who, but when they're writing their documents, they want to know what a decision is referenced to. And
Mm-hmm.
so like you'll have like a 20-page document, and you'll be able to say, okay, like that is written that way because this person said this and this person said that, and this is the order that says that. And so that's kind of part of where we're trying to go to as well, in more of like in a military sense, is like why is that the thing? Why do they say it instead of just a bunch of notes in the side of like the Word document? You
Mm-hmm.
can kind of see, oh, okay, that conversation happened and this person said it, and so that way you can kind of like, more importantly, when you hand over the document to the next person, because there's always that year-long posting cycle, they can look at all the why and who and where all as part of that handover, and they don't have to do it all in that 2-day handover, and they have to try and read the whole document and all the things all at once, because that's never going to happen. They can then refer to it and go, yeah, that the reason why that decision was made is because, then they can just follow where the
Yep.
threads are. Because that used to be just grind my gears all the time, particularly as like the chief initiatives group. I'd be working on stuff, and then I'd find out someone else has already been doing it for like 6 months, and I'm like, why are we not working together? Like, I don't
Right.
understand. Why are we not collaborating? So it's like, how do you pick up all those different pieces of information and help that? So that's kind of how Collabowave is looking to like really get help the frontline leaders and the frontline workers and all the different people that are out there that are typically their hands are busy because they're holding a weapon or they're holding a hammer or whatever. Um, how do they help them get their insights into the rest of the organization? So there's like a wave of collaboration kind of going behind them. That's what I'm working on.
Yeah, because when we deployed to Afghanistan, I remember we got to our base. There was a unit there that we were replacing, and for like the first week or so, they would go out with us on patrols and stuff, and they would go and introduce us to those people, those
Yeah.
local leaders, the Afghan police and the other people who were in that area, so we knew who we could collaborate with when we needed some help from the locals or things like that. Something was going wrong. We knew who to contact and who to call and all that type of stuff. Um, Super useful information to have, but God forbid something happened to those people before like we got there or as we were getting there, and we never got that information. Um, that would be pretty awful because now we have to go figure out, okay, where are these people? Where are they located? How do I get in touch with them? Why did we do certain things 6 months before we even got there or so? Why were those things done and all that? And so having documentation so we can go back and follow the thought process, because sometimes the thought process or the end result of whatever the decision was doesn't seem logical to you if you're sitting there without all the information. But if you can go back and kind of almost dig into the mind of the person who's making those decisions, then it makes a little bit more sense. You may not agree with the decision that was made, 6 months ago or whatever, um, but at least you understand where they're coming from. So it's not like, oh, this guy's an idiot because he did this. It's like, oh, well, he made that decision because he had this information, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the running joke of any deployment, it's like however long the deployment is, say it's 9 months, it's like the first 3 months, work out what your job's supposed to be. Next 3 months, work out why you do the job the way that you're doing the job. And then the last 3 months is like, oh, this is how we could really work out how we could fix the situation. But then you're like leaving the next week. You're like, oh man, there's
Yeah.
so much I wish I could have gotten to. But like it took you like 2/3 or so of the deployment to really do the knowledge
Mm-hmm.
transfer of like what has happened, who is actually useful to talk to, and then you'll go meet up with the deployment before for a beer when you get back to stateside, and they're like, oh yeah, we knew that too. Oh yeah, and like it just never like came as part of the handover. It's just because
Sure.
the handover is like, you can't make it like a year-long handover. Like there's only so much time you can make the handover. So how do you transfer that knowledge so that it's better to come across? And that's kind of like the problem that essentially the Collabowave was like that was building to fix it. Like I have one client. They have two CEOs of like a startup incubator, and the CEOs talk to like 150 advisors all the time. Like they're just like talking, but they don't write anything down because they're busy. Which
Mm-hmm.
most senior executives. I mean, if you went around the Pentagon, most of them don't have. They just don't have time to write down and like really like put all the information out because they're just going meeting to meeting to meeting to
Yeah.
meeting. And so they used to have like their mid-level people would go reach out to these advisors and say, "Hey, can we meet up next week? Can we do it?" And they're like, "Hey, just talk to your CEO yesterday. Like, go talk to them." And so they use the tool to that way the CEOs are just like, "Yeah, just talk to this advisor. His wife just had a kid. They're gonna get us into Walmart next week. Make sure we follow up next week." And so it's great because it automates that information for them, so that way
Mm-hmm.
the CEO can track it. But actually, the most important part of it is for everyone else to be tracking that knowledge transfer about like before they go do anything. They go, oh,
Yep.
okay, now I understand the situation. And so just making those insights super easy to go into the system is key. Because yeah, if you're asking like, I hate writing stuff down, and if you ask me to like put like I've always been probably the worst person on my handovers because it'll be like, oh god, I gotta go write out this like handover document for like
Right.
like 10 page handover document. And I'm like, I don't want to do this. But you'd kind of like as try and work out is like how little work you could possibly do to do it, because you're just
Hmm.
tired, you're lazy, or you don't even know what information you're supposed to have. A better way to do it is if it just becomes like a relatively easy behavior change, and it's just to like out loud just document what you're doing.
Sure.
And so that's what I'm hoping for, like police officers as well. Like they see something on their body cam, they just say, "Hey, 10 minutes ago, I just saw this on my body cam. It was the incident was the who, what, when, how, why, when." I mean, the when's time stamped on the thing anyway. But like, yeah,
Sure.
it's like all the information you need to do, and then so they don't have to like change their behaviors to then have to go in and like fill out a police report in their cruiser for
Hmm.
15 minutes. Instead, they can, I would assume, do something that they prefer to do, which is to drive around and, like go kick around and find out issues and stuff and report it. So,
Sure.
so yeah, so that's the problem with the knowledge transfer, is that like, and so it's just people don't. It's just it's not. You would think about it personality wise too. Like most anyway. I have a feeling that most army people just don't have the personality to want to sit behind a computer for
No.
hours and hours and hours and like write this amazing report and write like this really great handover document. Like just personality wise, that's just not something. And it's the same thing kind of for salespeople. If you ever see salespeople working around an event, like that's why there's memes making fun of the fact that salespeople don't fill out CRMs, like client relationship management
Yep.
systems, because they don't care. They just want to go around talking to people, and it's the same thing for army people. Like they just want to go around like talking to people, jumping out of airplanes, kicking doors. Like they don't want to go write like some big journal entry about like this one and whatever. Like preferably
Right.
for them, they'd rather just like talk out the AAR together and then hand over right after.
100%. And I know when I was in Afghanistan, we had to do a report after every mission and submit that into wherever it went to, and every mission, and we were infantry guys, so like we computers were not the thing that we were trained on, that we wanted to use all the time. We just wanted to go kick the doors and shoot the bad guys and come back to base and do it again tomorrow, and
Yeah.
that type of thing, right? But then, sure, you get done with that long mission, you're out for 12 hours or whatever, and then you got to come back and write a report about what happened. It's like shit, a lot of stuff happened, right? Like I don't remember everything that happened, but if I had a way to kind of record that as things were going, that would make it so much easier to say, oh yeah, that's right. At the beginning, when we first got there, that this is what happened, and later on in the day, this is what happened, and it would just make it so much easier to have all that information. I got to imagine for police officers, it's really the same thing. They respond to a call early in their shift. By the end of their shift, if they hadn't done all the paperwork and filed the reports, in their cruiser or whatever, while they're working, because it's a real busy shift. At the end of their shift, they got to come back and do all these reports for stuff that they probably forgot a lot of it, right? But if they could talk about it, and I'm not saying fill the report out for them 100%, but at least document what happened.
Well,
It makes it a lot easier, right?
it should be the initial one, and then you just review it, because
Mm-hmm.
reviewing is like way easier than starting from scratch. Like instead of looking at like a blank paper and you're like, oh god, I gotta go write this report about our 12-hour operation. Oh god.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but instead it should be like, okay, yeah, it's got most of the information. Oh, I'm gonna change this. Yep, yeah, that's actually, to be honest, that's what's happened. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can already get more details actually. Well, one of those clients we have is we're working with the Canadian Army to do it for their trains, their combat training center. So
Mm-hmm.
when they do like when the instructors, he's like a sergeant, is giving feedback to three students. What they would usually happen is that they give feedback for the three students. They'd write a couple things on a piece of paper somewhere, but then like an hour later they'd have to give three feedback for another three students, and they'd do that like 7 times a day, and then they would do that the whole week. And at the end of the week, they have to like write mid-course reports, and they'll be like, "Oh God, like what do they say to that guy?
Right.
Oh man, this is going to be the worst." So instead, instead you just use the app, and then while you're giving the feedback, you just record and say, "Yes, student A, strengths, weaknesses, things to think about. Student B, student C, automatically transcribes, parses it out, feeds it into the course reports for them, for student A, student B, student C. More importantly, automates an email to the student where they can read it at the end of the week. Where if like,
Mm.
okay, you've gotten feedback 8 times this week, here's the feedback, which is realistically there that you're in a better headspace to digest feedback really like a week later, like not actually at the time, like did I pass, did I fail, did I pass, did I fail,
Right.
or you're just like writing stuff down, you're trying to write stuff down because you're told to take notes. So anyway, all these notes would just automatically go to you anyway, and then more importantly, the trends would be tracked because then you could see like, okay, we've done 7 times 5, we did 35 pieces of feedback. What's the common thread here? And instead of kind of like what typically happens is people just off the top of their head go, like, I told them that they needed to do a warning order better. That you can actually see the metrics of it all, of the feedback, and you're like, yeah, 60% of this, and then like, hey, we should change our training to fit that. So like
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of, but these are the things that happen because like 75% of all our communication in military, police, security-focused areas are all it's what we're used to. And so like to
Yeah.
think that military guys are going to get out of the military, and then they're all of a sudden going to be like shy away from that. Like that's where most of them enjoy. Like they verbally talk through what they're doing. They speak out loud. They give orders. And so you got to try and like lean into the behaviors that have already been set. Don't
Sure.
try and change the behaviors. Anyway, that's my theory. So
Yeah, no, I love it because you're right. A lot of communication does take place verbally, and like over the radios, for example, like that. There, there's no other way. Like on the radio, it's just going to be verbal, right? And so you get this information, communicate that way. And so yeah, we are used to that. We're very used to the verbal communication and being able to just record something real quick. Sometimes it might only take 10 or 15 seconds to get out what you need to say, and that'll save you way more time later on. So yeah, sure, you're going to take a little bit of time now, but all that information feeds into a report, feeds into database or wherever it needs to go, and it just saves you so much time later. So you don't have to sit there and figure out, okay, who, at a conference, who was this person from this business card or that business card, or where did I meet them? What were we talking about? Because even to be perfectly honest, I'm looking at all these business cards. These are some of the ones that I got from the conference. I have not written a single thing on any of them. And so, like, looking at them, like, if I was trying to remember, okay, who was this person? When did I meet them? What did we talk about? They better have some good information on their business card. Otherwise, I've probably forgotten. Um,
Well,
so,
on our
yeah, go
tool,
ahead.
you can actually take a picture of the business card, and so it actually just pulls the information from the business card and
Perfect.
feeds it into the CRM for you. But then, yeah, you would just feed a bit more information and afterwards and say, yeah, this is what we talked about. This was useful. Might be useful for this. It's even more important. Like right now, you're kind of running and gunning by yourself there, Scott. But imagine if you
Hmm.
had a team of like 3 people. I guess
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like for all those veteran businesses that are associations or nonprofits, and you have like a team that are doing outreach engagement. Like in a perfect world, you want to have that pretty well aligned,
Yeah.
and that way, if they're going to reach out to a certain company, like they want to know that you've talked to that company, and even if it's just a quick chat at a conference, and
Hmm.
but like whatever insights you can have before you go out to that company or to that stakeholder or government
Sure.
agency, based on previous engagements, the better. And
Yeah.
this usually it takes like a lot of work to do that, and so we're just hoping to do it as easy as possible, so you don't have to think about it that much.
Yeah, 100%. And I know from the company that I work for, we have a team of people, and on occasion we have more than one person who's working with a particular client. And so in our CRM that we have, we keep track of email communications and phone calls and all that kind of stuff that we will just add a note to, whatever the lead or the contact, whoever it is that we're talking to. We'll add that note in there so that way the other person who's working on that same client doesn't follow up on the same thing. That way we're not tripping over each other and replying to the same email twice and calling the person twice or all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, having that information readily available is super important.
Does
Um,
does
yeah,
everyone fill it out?
we've gotten pretty good at it. It's not 100%,
Well,
but
just
we have gotten pretty good.
I asked the question because, like, even if you're incentivized and told, and there's like part of your business, you have to fill it
Yeah.
out. People don't fill it out. So imagine if you're a nonprofit with like volunteers. Like,
Yep.
what's the chances they're going to fill it
It's
out?
gonna be a lot more difficult. Yeah, I was actually pleasantly surprised because I was the one who kind of helped implement it and get everyone on board with it and everything, and it wasn't the easiest process, but I think we've gotten on most people on board. Most people are keeping it relatively up to date. It's pretty good. Not 100%, but yeah, I'm sure there's some work that could be done there, but it's definitely better than it was when before we were just using a spreadsheet that was not getting updated at all, and now we have pretty good thorough detailed insights and everything like that. So we're doing a lot better with that. So anyways, for the veterans who are out there who are listening to this and they or even anybody they veteran or not, if you are in that networking space and you want to connect with people, you have a team of people, maybe you have several people who are going to the same conference, and you both talk to the same person, and you both want to follow up with that person. Well, if it goes into that database, that centralized location, now okay, well, we had 2 points of contact with this, and so then you can reference that in that communication with the person as well. So and get the other person's thoughts and feedback and ideas and all that on who this person is and what you might want to follow up with. So if there's people out there who are interested in this and in what it is that you have to offer, where can people go to find out more information about it?
Just collabowave.com, which I'm sure will be in the notes.
Sure. Yeah.
And or they can reach out to me
Mm-hmm.
on LinkedIn.
Great.
It's just Caleb Walker, which I'm sure will be in the notes as well.
Yep.
Yeah, if anyone's interested, I mean, I'm looking for other associations that have a huge community that want to try it out as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be great. Or if companies or people just want to use the tool, you can just buy it off online. But if you want to have a certain like special metrics that you want to track or some kind of solution that matches what you're looking for, just reach out and we can kind of optimize it and customize it for you.
Oh, that's awesome too. For specific use cases, you can kind of tweak it and optimize it to make sure it's not just a generic, general type thing that doesn't necessarily fit what you're doing, but it will now be kind of tailored to your use case. So I think that's pretty cool too. Yes, and absolutely, I'll have the links to the website and to your profile on LinkedIn for folks if they want to reach out and they want to get in touch or they want to learn more about Collabowave. I think it's a pretty cool tool. When we talked about it, I was pretty happy and to hear about it, and I think just what you're doing is certainly going to be beneficial for folks. I know I'm going to check it out and see how that might influence my network in a positive way. So we'll check it out, and maybe we'll have you back on. We'll do another kind of feedback type episode later on. So it'd be kind of cool.
That'd be perfect.
Yeah, excellent. So thanks again for taking the time to come on the show, sharing the information about what you're doing and how it might be able to help some folks out there in their networking world.
Thanks, Scott.